This is an absolute heist for the Rangers. After a very interesting start to the season for the Blue Shirts, multiple reports and rumors are circulating around the Rangers making a blockbuster trade for one player in particular. And who's going back the other way will surprise Rangers fans. And this has major implications on the roster in the immediate, but also gives us some insight into how Chris Drury can retool this roster on the fly. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 72% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on with the New York Rangers, go down below, hit that free subscribe button, because this channel is built for blue shirt fandom and it's the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers update. But Bret, let's get right into it. There's a lot of rumors and reports flying around right now because trade talk and chatter is going to be taking place earlier this year because of the Olympics and because some teams already know that they are in trouble. So not to say that the Rangers are one, they've been playing very well, but let's take a look at some of these reports. You can see this from RG Media. According to an NHL source, the Maple Leafs and the Rangers already have their hands in the cookie jars with Martin Necas, who of course, has been rumored that it's not that he's necessarily disgruntled in Colorado, but it doesn't seem like he's in any rush to get a contract extension done. And we've seen what the Colorado Avalanche do to players like that last year with Mikko Rantanen. So I think that's very interesting to start. You also have other reports on the other side of things where, Pierre LeBrun is saying that he thinks that eventually an extension will get done. But I think it's interesting. We know Colorado does like to explore trades like this. He is a great player. He would absolutely help the New York Rangers. We'll get into what the trade is in a second, but what do you make of these reports and the player himself?
Yeah, so very interesting, Darius. I mean, this is a young guy, 26 years of age. We're going to break down the player a little bit later on in this video, but at first glance, the Rangers have, a package that could make sense in return for, Colorado that would make sense for both parties involved. Necas has come out and said that after the trade from Carolina to Colorado, that he was unhappy, with his role in Colorado. Not only that, but they had contract negotiations. They had extension talks and weren't able to reach a deal, at least not yet. Obviously, the season is well underway and there is no contract for Martin Necas. And, that gets the ears going up. The ears are up and you have to be alert now because we saw guys like McDavid and Kaprizov and Eichel. We saw these guys get locked up, but there are some intriguing players on the open market still. I know there are no franchise altering players, but a player like Necas is very interesting, is very intriguing, and Darius and I are going to get into why he makes sense for the Rangers.
Yeah, because he's a great player. And you can see this from Adam. Martin Necas would be a difference maker, I think, for this team right now with his speed, his skill, the fact that he's a younger player still, like he's not that old. He can drive plays. He's very dynamic. So I think he'd be a great player. You can see here, a lot of people are already talking about if the rumors are true. And again, they're just rumors that he's disgruntled in Colorado. He could end up resigning, but this is a player that you need to at least try to go out and acquire if he is available or does become available. You can see that this year, the Rangers could make it work. He makes $6.5 million. There are players on the roster that you could give up in a trade, which I would imagine the Avalanche would want a roster player back to make this work. You can absolutely make it work. So he doesn't even make that much this year. And he's well worth his cap hit right now, $6.5 million. And he is going off so far this season. He has 9 points in 5 games. He is well over a point a game player. Over the course of his career, and especially the last couple of years, he's been in and around that anyway. So he is an absolute stud. He is only going to be 27 years old. He's got the size. He plays big minutes as well. This is a no-brainer for me in terms of what the player is and what he can bring to your team. The biggest thing to me, Bret, is, and we can talk about it now, is the contract, right? And what that might look like. The Rangers this year, like I mentioned, if you look at the cap right now, doesn't really make sense because Vincent Trocheck's on LTIR, but their projected cap space, and the fact that they could trade a roster player, they could make space for this player. But he is projected right now because of what he's currently doing to make $12 million over the course of 8 years. Now, of course, that would age very well, but what do you make of that? That is a steep price, but listen, with Panarin coming off the books, with a lot of projected salary, they have about $20 million in projected salary. You can make that work, and this would be your top line winger, right? Like it would make all the sense in the world, especially with what's going back the other way, which we'll get into in a second.
Well, Darius, I'm gonna, play devil's advocate as well. But first, I want to start off with the good when it comes to Necas. And Darius and I are gonna give our trade proposals here in just a moment. But Necas, like you said, Darius, he's a great player. He's off to a sizzling start. I mean, 9 points in 5 games. He's a straight line type of player. An athlete that Mike Sullivan absolutely salivates over. That north to south style of game. That's how he makes his money. That's how he scores his points. The speed, the acceleration is there. He has a big frame that you could stick at the net front. The problem is, and here's where I play devil's advocate and disagree a little bit with acquiring this player, because, Mike Sullivan does love the north to south style of hockey. Mike Sullivan does love the aggressive, straight line hockey that Martin Necas brings to the table. But let's not forget, guys, despite having that big frame that I just spoke about, he's not a physical player. In the D zone, he's not very good. This is an offensive skilled,
No.
offensive minded player. He doesn't do, much of the dirty work. He doesn't battle along the boards. He doesn't, forecheck, finish the forecheck the way guys on the Rangers do, like Noah Laba, actually creating that goal for Parsonen last night, finishing forechecks in those dirty areas on the ice. So if you acquire Necas, you have to understand, what you see is what you get. You get a very talented first line type of scorer. The Rangers need scoring punch, obviously. We've seen it so far this season. But you have to understand that when you get Necas, you also have to understand his deficiencies. It comes in the D zone and it comes, in the dirty areas on the ice, which Mike Sullivan does value very highly.
Definitely. And I think that he is, to a degree, a one-dimensional player. I could agree with that. So you have to at least take that into account, that you would need pieces playing with him that, could feed him the puck, could go get him the puck and do those things that, some players don't want to do. So you would have to take that into consideration. But let's get into what a trade might look like. And Jackson Weber wrote an article that, it's looking like maybe it's just a 1-for-1 swap. It's Alexis Lafreniere for Martin Necas. Now, there's a lot there, right? There's a lot of rumors out there about Martin Necas, so maybe you just want to hold on to Alexis Lafreniere. To me personally, if this is 1-for-1, this is a highway robbery. You run away, you make this trade. Of course, you're going to be paying him much more. Necas, this is next year, than what Lafreniere is even making right now and is signed long-term to be making. So I think it's very interesting. I think that, Lafreniere has looked good so far this year, but I'll pose the question to you again, Bret, and I'll pose it to the viewers as well. Would you do this trade? Would you do Martin Necas for Lafreniere 1-for-1? I say yes. I think it makes sense. I think it also makes sense long-term, especially if you don't know what's happening with Artemi Panarin, right? You're going to need some scoring punch in the future. And if you lose Artemi Panarin, that's a problem.
Yeah, Darius, I do it in a heartbeat. But, I want to bring up another trade, go down another avenue here. Let's say Colorado doesn't want Alexei Lafreniere. I also floated, a few videos ago, when the rumors are hot with Necas, when all these big free agents are getting re-signed and you have a guy like Necas still available, most likely on the open market, a very talented player. I brought up the name Scott Morrow.
Yep.
But there's another name I'm going to bring up as well. And, I brought up Morrow because, their blue line, they have Brent Burns. The guy is he's older than Jonathan Quick at this point. He is very old. He's about to retire. So I thought maybe Scott Morrow would make some sense with some draft capital. But how about Artemi Panarin? How about Artemi Panarin for Martin Necas swap? And I believe this deal makes sense for both sides, Darius. I really do because, Colorado, a win now team, not too far removed from a Stanley Cup. They have a lot of 30-plus-year-old players. Some of their best players, like the Rangers, are older. So acquiring a player like Panarin, you could move Lehkonen, who plays on that first line, to the right wing. You still have Landeskog, on that second line. Left wing, you keep him there. Obviously, McKinnon, we all know what he brings to the table, Makar, etc. But, you put Panarin on that team and you give the Rangers Necas. Now, the Rangers have an interesting blend of, still that veteran group of stars, but they also have a guy in Necas who, like when the Rangers signed Panarin, Panarin was younger than 30 years old, and you see how well that contract ended up playing out. The Rangers have had a lot of success with the Breadman despite his early season struggles this year. We have to give credit where it's due. One of the best free agent signings in history, but the Rangers need to find a star that's young. They need to find a star that they can hopefully build around for the future. And Necas fits perfectly Like I said, that north to south style of hockey, that's how JT Miller plays. That's how Mika Zibanejad has been playing. But unfortunately, Darius, I have not seen Panarin completely buy in. He looks a little checked out. I know he's struggling and that is on his mind, but he's still playing that east to west game. And Necas, it would make some sense for both sides, Darius. It's very, very interesting.
Necas has been explosive. It would be, I think, a really good trade for the Rangers. And I think if it's Lafreniere, I think there is some use there for the Colorado Avalanche. He would look great with some of their players. If it is Panarin, that also does make some sense to a degree, like you brought up, right? They're in a win now window. Panarin's also, nearing the end of his career at some point if you were to sign like a 4 or 5 year extension. And, getting Necas the other way, if he's not going to re-sign in Colorado, then, if he does want to in New York, that would add another layer of scoring to the New York Rangers. And as we found out last night, again, it's home or away, they're having trouble scoring, right? So they need some help there in that department. You make a good point about Panarin too. We'll have another video on that on the channel in terms of his struggles and stuff like that. It looks like he's a bit checked out. He could also be injured. There's some updates on that as well. So we'll keep you guys up to date here on the channel, but we want to hear what you have to say. Let us know about everything we discussed here in this video. Would you trade Lafreniere for Martin Necas? Would you trade for Martin Necas for somebody else? Let us know in the comments. The conversation always continues there. It continues on X and TikTok. You can find the links to those in the description. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.